Has anyone ever seen The Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner.
That was Republican frontrunner and convicted felon Donald Trump last month, offering his thoughts on a cool new movie that was released 33 years ago. But did anyone question Donald Trump's mental fitness or even his basic connection to the time-space continuum? No, they did not. That is perhaps because after nearly a decade of this increasingly unhinged commentary, the American public has become somewhat numb to Donald Trump's particular verbal madness.
If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one, okay?
And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people, soldiers, National Guard, so whatever they want. They turned it down.
And we did with Obama. We won an election that everyone said couldn't be won.
Like a memory question. It's like you'll go person, woman, man, camera, TV. So they say, could you repeat that? So I said, yeah. So it's person, woman, man, camera, TV. It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
Is it really not that easy, though? Though President Biden receives far more press for his verbal miscues and mistakes, the reality is that Donald Trump is in a league of his own when it comes to strange non sequiturs and rambling anecdotes that lead nowhere and fantastical scenarios that have no basis in reality. Even against that backdrop, though, the ad-libbed hypothetical that Mr. Trump presented this past weekend in Nevada, it really stood out.
What would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there? By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark. So there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards. Or here, do I get electrocuted? If the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking. Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? But you know what I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted? I'll take electrocution every single time. I'm not getting near the shark. So we're going to end that. We're going to end it for boats.
Just to be clear, this scenario will never come to pass on planet Earth, in part because of the laws of buoyancy and conductivity, and in part because a former president will never, ever be in a sinking boat with a shark 10 yards away. It just is not going to happen. But as absurd as these moments are, as surreal as the sinking boat shark bite scenario is, there is weirdly a strategy in play here. Trump's apparent conditioning of a large swath of the American public to accept his incoherent rambling as normal, or at least as something other than addled and alarming, has become one of his biggest campaign advantages. With the spotlight on President Biden's age and acuity, Trump and all of his malapropisms have seemingly gotten a pass. And there is no better day to put Trump's aging but florid mind into perspective than today, because today is Donald Trump's birthday. Trump is now 78 years old, only 3 years younger than President Biden. While marking this milestone, Susan Glasser of The New Yorker offers this assessment of the Republican frontrunner. Wherever one stands on the broader question of Trump's mental health, the evident decline in his ability to speak clearly and coherently feels striking. If there were ever a case for age-related diminishment of a candidate, Trump is it. Joining me now is Susan Glasser, staff writer at The New Yorker. Susan, can we talk about this descent into ultra weird and what you have seen in particular that causes you to make this assessment?
Well, Alex, there's a lot of material here. Let's be real. You this evening have already played the shark electrocution boat thing, which honestly, I mean, I wouldn't pretend to, have any political strategist in me, but if I were a political strategist, I might suggest running that as a campaign ad over and over again. If one were so inclined, it's pretty remarkable stuff. Trump is a tough character when trying to unpack, which part is just who he is, which part has gotten worse over time. Certainly you look at the vocabulary, you look at the challenges, speaking in clear sentences and communicating. That is something that has changed pretty radically over time. I would say even from 2016 to 2020 to 2024, the progress of a Trump rally shows you pretty clearly a man on a sharp downward slope.
It's interesting because his campaign released a statement after people's eyebrows were collectively raised over the Shark battery's buoyancy scenario. And this is what Jason Miller had to say, his advisor. President Trump takes on numerous tough interviews every single week and delivers lengthy rally speeches while standing, demonstrating elite stamina. First of all, I didn't know a stamina could be elite. But secondly, Susan, it's almost like what he says is beside the point. The fact that he's up there standing, still talking is enough, the Trump team thinks, to placate anyone or dissuade them from thinking that he's somehow addled. And thus far, they seem to be right. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's way more scrutiny on President Biden than there is on President Trump, former President Trump, given the absurd tirades and non sequiturs that are now a part of his daily routine.
Well, look, that's right. And again, part of the problem is the fire hose of lies and BS problem, which is to say that if we already feel Trump has overwhelmed us with bizarre digressions for years, then unpacking what's new and different becomes so hard that people just throw up their hands. But remember, person, woman, man, camera, TV in 2020, Donald Trump has always graded himself on a curve in the same way that Jason Miller there is grading Trump on a curve, saying, oh, no, it's OK as long as he can stand up.
Yes.
That's a pretty remarkable standing up. Also, I thought Trump was running against the elites, and I've literally never heard anyone assert the condition of elite stamina. Have you?
No, I don't think I have elite stamina, for the record. I'm not sure I even have stamina.
I definitely do not.
Donald Trump has elite stamina. I do have to ask, though, I mean, this is all thrown into sharp relief when the two men are on stage debating, right? And it already feels like, the first presidential debate is set for June 27th. It already feels like the bar that is set for Biden to clear is so much substantially higher than the one Trump has to clear, which is literally, is he alive? Is he standing? Are the words coming out of his mouth? Setting aside what the words actually are. And I wonder if there's any way for Biden to overcome what seems like a structural disadvantage on, in the weeks leading up to what's going to be a pretty important inflection point in this campaign.
Yeah, Alex, I think that's an important question. We don't know the answer yet. The challenge with Trump, running against Trump for Biden, is that it's not really a head-to-head contest in which they're both being judged by the same terms. It's much more akin to sort of parallel play, non-intersecting until the moment of voting play. Biden had that funny joke at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, right? He said, yeah, I'm running against a 6-year-old. But the truth is that Trump is engaging in his own game and appealing to his own followers who don't hold him accountable to the same standards as other public officials in this country. And so he, in quote unquote, gets away with things that I think anyone else would have a hard time doing because of what he's looking to do, which is to keep his MAGA base faithful to him. Biden has a much tougher task. He has a much more traditional view of the presidency. It's a much tougher job, the way that Biden has defined it. And so I think that's part of the challenge here. But when you see them together, remember that first fall 2020 debate between the two of them. That was, I think, a striking moment for many Americans. It probably did help Joe Biden put away the first campaign and defeat Donald Trump. Trump seemed out of control. It was truly, I think, the worst debate I've ever seen between any presidential candidates. And largely the tone was set by Trump, who was not just incoherent, but virulent and, just careening around. Remember, Biden's best line in that first debate in 2020 was, "Enough already, man."
Yes.
And, I think I'm a little bit kind of worried that we're going to see a repeat of that. It was pretty awful to watch, frankly.
Well, we do know, at least, that Trump isn't intending on doing any debate practice heading into one of the most important moments of his political career. So we have that unrehearsed Trump in the raw to look forward to on June 27th. Susan Glasser with The New Yorker, thank you for your time this Friday night, Susan.